Did you know that 2 million years ago, the life expectancy of our ancestors dropped dramatically? It wasn't a meteor. It wasn't an ice age. It wasn't a natural disaster. The reason? Evolution itself. In a hostile and wild world, death remained merciless with our ancestors of the time, Homo Habilis. In the form of powerful predators, accidents, and infections, it killed our distant relatives with terrifying efficiency. But this era introduced something new to the many faces of death, an unexpected novelty. Because what seemed like an advance against death became a new way of spreading it, and as always, she was there. Patient, watching, waiting, evolving with us. Homo habilis lived between 2.4 and 1.4 million years ago. He was small, standing only 3 to 4 feet tall, and weighing between 65 and 110 pounds, and looked fragile against that unforgiving environment. But he carried something new, a brain slightly larger than that of Australopithecus afarensis, a brain that, little by little, dared to reinvent the way of surviving and of dying. This hominin was omnivorous. In addition to roots, fruits, and seeds, he also ate meat, hunting small animals and sometimes even taking down slightly larger prey. But the true difference lay in his hands. Habilis means skilled or handy. And he earned this name because it was in this period that the first stone tools appeared. From his hands came primitive knives, scrapers, and crude hammers. These rough tools were not a perfect defense against ancestral felines, giant hyenas, great reptiles, or raptors. But against other Homo habilis, they were fatal. For the first time, death was no longer only a hidden hunter in the bushes. Now, it lived in the hands of a primate. Death had put on the mask of war, and the first wars in history were not between armies, but between small bands fighting for food, water, and territory. The blood that once flowed only from fangs and claws now ran from stones raised in human hands. Wounds once unthinkable, deep cuts, crushed skulls became common. A fight for a water source or an animal carcass, which once ended in light injuries and reaffirmed hierarchy, could now end with lifeless bodies on the ground. Every tool carried a double promise: to cut the flesh of prey, or the flesh of another Homo habilis. Evolution gave us a weapon, but it didn't teach us how to use it without destroying ourselves. And if this revelation intrigues you, subscribe now and keep watching, because death has always been here, and it continues reinventing itself to this very day. Conflict and violence within the same species are not unusual in nature. Battles for territory, resources, and hierarchy are observed in many animals. Among primates, science knows that chimpanzees, our closest relatives, also wage war. They form silent patrols, invade neighboring territories, and ambush rival males, planned cruel attacks that can last for years. Chimpanzees know war. Gorillas, on the other hand, rarely kill. Their disputes are brutal, but they usually end in displays of strength or serious wounds, not in death. And bonobos, surprisingly, found another path. They almost never resort to lethal violence. They resolve conflict with sex, alliances, and social care. We humans, of course, belong to the group of animals that developed intraspecies conflict, but the use of tools brought a brutal difference. Killing became easier, involving far less risk for the attacker, and so we went further. We turned fights into massacres, disputes into murders. With stones and bones in our hands, we weren't just another violent primate. We were a new species, the animal that would kill its own kind more than any other. It is possible to imagine a small group of Homo Habilis gathered around the carcass of a freshly killed animal. The sharpened stones glisten under the fading sun, smeared with blood and fat. One of them steps too close. Maybe he wants the best part of the meat, maybe he just crossed the invisible line of possession. The other's eyes harden. A dense silence lingers amid the distant cries of hyenas. Then the first blow. A stone raised high comes crashing down on the skull. The sound is not that of prey being butchered. It is the dry, cracking sound of bone against stone. A scream of pain followed by a second strike. More precise, more brutal. The body falls, convulses, as dust rises around it. It wasn't a predator. It wasn't a fall from a tree. It wasn't the randomness of nature. It was death at human hands. Around, the group watches. Some step back, others move closer. The smell of violence mixes with the smell of meat. And in that moment, something new was born in human history. The certainty that death's greatest ally from then on would be man himself. Death gained craft. It wasn't only in the claws of a lion or the fangs of a hyena. It now lurked within the groups themselves, in suspicious glances, in silent ambushes. It was a manufactured death, a human death, and the more creative the hands of Homo Habilis became, the more creative death itself became. Homo Habilis survived, but at a terrible price. A life shorter than his predecessors and marked by violence. He endured because he was stubborn, resilient. But he left us a dark legacy that follows us to this day. Proof that evolution does not only bring progress, sometimes it brings new ways to serve death. 2 million years ago, life expectancy fell drastically, and the cause was not a meteor, nor an ice age. It was evolution itself. And as always, death was there, patient, watching, waiting, evolving with us. If this ancient story made you reflect, be prepared. Death is only beginning to take on ever more surprising forms. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and keep following the evolution of death.